Josiah, welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm so glad that we could make this happen. I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, not just because you're a local pastor, which you are, but also just because you have done podcasting in the past, and I figured it would be a good hang. So, Josiah, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. Cool.
For those who don't know you, you're on Substack and all that kind of stuff. So introduce yourself, your family, your church, your ministry, all that kind of stuff.
So my name is Josiah. I am the pastor of Grace Chapel, about 10 minutes from Brad down the road. And I got a wife named Brittany, got 2 little girls, and another little girl on the way coming in a month and a half, somewhere in there. So yeah, girl dad, drowning in estrogen, but it's been good. It's a lot of fun.
Girl dad.
Yep, that's right, 100%. And and been on Substack now for almost a year. That's been fun, and kind of taken my writing journey and made it a little bit more official. Kind of was just background, doing a little bit of stuff here and there, and finally decided to put it out into the light a little bit. And that's been kind of fun to see how it's going. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Substack has been such a fun community. You've talked a lot about this. I think you and I off air, but also even on your Substack, you've talked about this. Just like getting to know people through like these online forums, it can kind of seem like this ethereal thing, this ephemeral thing. It doesn't have a lot of like teeth into it, but for whatever reason, Substack feels different. I don't know if that's just because we're biased because we're on there, but it feels different. Like I've had a lot of good connections.
Yeah, it's funny that like you talk about Substack, and I was talking to somebody the other day on there about how I advertised Facebook as being, I'm trying to remember how I said it. What did I say? For number 1 being a waste of time, and number 2 is being fraught with negativity. It's like, if you want to sum up Facebook, it's fraught with negativity and it's a waste of time. And then you come to Substack and it's this whole different community of people. And I don't know if it's their algorithm. I don't know if it's just, I don't want to say the quality of people on there, because that makes it sound like people that use Facebook are no good. But, I'm on Facebook too. But there's one of the neat things about Substack is the community there, and especially my algorithm, is it actually feeds me stuff I want to see.
Yeah.
So that's been really fun that like I hop on, and it's not a bunch of junk about the news that I'm not interested in. It's not a bunch of like, this crazy bad thing happened, and here's all the different takes that no one can no one can agree on. You get on there, and it's, good Bible-believing Christians just putting out content and different things and trying to love on one another. What's really neat is talking about this book is I've had a bunch of people, kind of conversing about it, but I actually connected with a guy from Ireland. It's really neat. So he's like an apologetics guy. His name's the Layman Apologist. He's on Substack and YouTube and all those things. And he's into like I don't want to say argumentation side, but more, I guess, logic is probably a better way of putting it, right?
Okay.
Of like the Christian faith, right?
Yeah.
So in one of my chapters, my book is not supposed to really be like an apologetics textbook by any means, but I dip my toe into apologetics a tiny bit. And I'm not like an expert arguer, like analyzing logic, analyzing what are they called? The faulty ways of thinking, whatever. The word's not coming to me right now. You know what I mean? Like
I do.
Yeah, you're the fallacies, logical fallacies and stuff.
Sure.
So he's really into that, and he was going on some different things, and he's like, here's this logical fallacy. Here's why this argument doesn't hold weight. And I hit him up one day. I was like, since you're into all that stuff and logical fallacies, like the logic side of things really good. So would you read one of the subheadings of my book and see if I'm an idiot or not? Basically like, is this actually a good, argument? Is this actually decent logic? And, it was super cool. It's like this guy from Ireland that in real life I would have never met. And he read it. He gave me some feedback. He's like, I think this is really good. Here's how you could sharpen your argument and it'd be better. And I was like, now that you hit me with that, it's like, I totally agree. Like what you say has a lot of merit to it. And, so I updated it, according to his suggestions. I thought it was much better. Sent it back to him. He read it again. He's like, I think this is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like the internet has brought about, countless evil things, and like, everybody knows the evil stuff, but then you can connect with believers across the globe and, not only for the purpose of edification, but like this guy helped me out.
Yeah. There is good to be found on the internet.
Yeah, for sure.
As hard as that may be to believe sometimes.
Yeah. And it's found on Substack.
Yeah. That's right. I want to talk about your book, but first, before we get there, like, you're a pastor. You and I have connected a lot about that because how long have you been at Grace Chapel?
I've been at Grace Chapel for about 3.5 years.
3.5 years, yeah. And so you've like I came into Stonington right before like COVID hit. You were kind of like right after all
right
that
after
kind of
COVID
stuff.
hit, yep.
But we are both kind of young guys in ministry, coming into ministry at such a weird time, and maybe global politics or American history or whatever you want to say. So like, what are some of the things that you've learned? You know, you're 3 odd years into ministry.
Sure.
What are some things that you've learned? Some things that have like developed for you as being not just an expositor, but a pastor, a shepherd of people here in central Pennsylvania?
Sure. Oh, that's a really good question. So I wouldn't say by any means I'm an expert on much of anything at this point in time, but definitely grown a little bit. I found that one of the things that, you know, really for me in ministry, and I think that makes such a difference across the board, is remembering that people are people and that they have their own dreams, their own desires, their own personalities, you know. And I think that a big part of ministry is not just looking at the, I don't want to say the more spectacular side of Bible exposition and proclamation and all the fun stuff that people think about. But if you can actually love people as people and do that genuinely, not with a agenda to get them to listen to you better, you know, I think that that's really, really a helpful thing. In my former position, I definitely felt like I was, I don't want to say dehumanized in, like, they weren't like the most awful people, but you know, if you're kind of lower on the organizational chart, so to speak, sometimes you can be treated like a cog in the machine.
Huh.
You know what I mean? And it's like you lose some of your humanity with how people treat you. It's like, you know, the classic idea is you should treat people the way you want to be treated.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, that's, you know, what you teach to kindergartners. And sometimes as adults, we forget that, you know, you get into these positions and it's like, you just start treating everybody as a piece of the machine. And it's like, you know, they got their task and you kind of disassociate them from being a person. And I found that for me, one of the most helpful things is to remember that everyone's got their own lives, their own personality, their own dreams, their own them, you know, that they kind of bring to the table, and trying to love them as individuals and trying to help them genuinely as individuals to grow in their relationship with God and their service to the church and different things, to me has gone a long way.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And having that be one of the focuses, like I'm here, you know, I think often to what Peter says in 1 Peter 4, talking about using your gifts, being good stewards of your gifts as each has received a gift, use it. Basically, the two ways you steward gifts well is for the glory of God and for the service of others.
Yep.
And so when people are ultimately your motivation, you know, like to try to actually help people and to serve them rather than serving myself, and in so doing, glorifying God. I mean, it's kind of where I'm at. That's my goal. And I think we're doing it pretty well at Grace Chapel. I mean, you hear testimonies of people's lives being impacted. And I try to think a lot of the concept of church growth being more about the believers themselves growing rather than just the numbers.
Correct.
You know, and I think so many times people are like, well, you know, your success in ministry is like, well, you need a bigger church. And you look at people like Joel Osteen, you're like, well, is he successful? And, you know, a lot of people would say, well, from a worldly perspective, yes. But if you're sacrificing truth in order to get people in the pews, you know, it's like, I don't know if I'd call that success.
Yeah.
But if I see my people growing and loving God more and serving him better and understanding his word more, that's great church growth.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Like you don't see it on Sunday mornings, but when you see it in their hearts, it's like, that means more to me than more people in the seats.
1000%.
I mean, I'll take both, but like, you know, you know, but like, that's my goal, is to help the believers. And so that's really where we've been at. I think it's been a good journey so far. I definitely don't think I have it all figured out. I definitely still get a very strong sense of imposter syndrome. You know, it's hard to go from being the guy kind of on the bottom, like, hey, you know, we got this toilet that needs fixed, or you need to go change this light bulb. And you're just kind of always being sent by other people to all of a sudden, like, the pastor of the church. Like, it just still doesn't, you know, when people would call me Pastor Ott or just addressing me as pastor, I'm like, you know, kind of turn around like,
who are they talking to?
Yeah, who are they talking to? You know, and it's like, I still don't think I'm quite there. I still don't think it's clicked. You know, I'm like 3 years later, I'm like, I don't know if that ever changes, but
I don't know.
You've been around for like 6 years?
Yeah,
now?
I've been here. Well, I'm going on 7.
Going on 7, okay.
And I don't know if that ever changes, because my mind goes to like when Paul, he's talking in 1 Corinthians 15, right? And he's like, I'm the least of all the apostles. Like even he, as an apostle, and he's been an apostle for years at that point, he was like, I'm the lowest on the totem pole. And so I think that sense of, it's not like a fake, I don't think it's a fake humility. I think it's actually an honest sort of honest admission of the sense of our calling, right? Like, I think part of being a pastor is not getting caught up in some of the minutia of what it means to shepherd people on a daily basis. But I think you have to be involved in that, sure. But then also being able to step back and remember, like, the enormity of the calling, and that's not meant to be some sort of thing that gives us a lot of pressure or expectation. It's just meant to give us that sense of, like, awe. I think Paul Tripp,
humbling.
It's humbling. Paul Tripp talks about that in his book called Awe. This sense of just, like, remembering who we are, our identity, like our smallness, our we are kind of insignificant, and like that kind of
exceedingly insignificant.
We're insignificant. We're also very replaceable, and that's. I mean, I'm very fine with that. Like I can be replaced very easily, and that sense of knowing that, like, what truly matters isn't me. It's the ministry of the word. That's what matters. And I think that's what Paul is getting at when he's like, I'm the least of the apostles. And then he goes on and he's like, but I worked harder than all of them. Not because, like, he was trying to earn something, but he says right in that same passage, but because the grace of God was working in me and working through me. And I think that's sort of like, even to, like, now I'm mixing a lot of Paul stuff, but, like, that's the upward call that he talks about in Philippians. That's kind of what I aspire to, that, like, what he talks about in 1 Corinthians 15, just being like, I'm the least of all of this, but I'm going to work harder than anyone because the grace of God is working in me, so to speak. Yeah,
when you realize how much you don't deserve it. Like, I try to do personal devotions beyond, like, church stuff. It's hard because it's like you got church Sunday morning stuff, you got church Wednesday night stuff, I'm trying to do this writing ministry in Warren Kings, and then I'm trying to do my own, like, on top of that I still need to feed my soul. And I'm in Galatians right now, and then Galatians 2, you saw my thing on Substack. I don't know what it was 2 weeks ago, but it's like, Paul talks about how God was calling him before his mother's womb, and it's like there was a moment in time when God was pleased to reveal his son in Paul, and that's when Paul's calling went public. That's when everyone realized that Saul of Tarsus was going to be Paul the Apostle. And, like, to human beings, this was nuts, right? Because, like, nobody saw, it was on nobody's bingo card that this guy was going to be an apostle, and that he was going to be, like, the most impactful person in the history of Christianity aside from the Lord Jesus himself. Like, nobody saw that coming. We forget about that because we read it so many times. We're like, oh yeah, we know Acts 9's coming. They didn't know Acts 9 was coming.
That's right.
They had no clue. Like, for them, it's like, this is nuts. But Paul says, listen, that was God's plan all along. And it's like, and that's kind of my takeaway, is like, if God's appointed us to this before we were even born, how could we deserve that? Like, I wasn't even here. It's not like, I'm here and I do some good stuff, and then God says, I think you got some potential. It's like God appointed us to this task before we were ever even a thought in our parents' mind, and that's if we were even a thought in our parents' mind. Some people are surprises. That's a whole other story. It's like, but the infinite, almighty God took pleasure in appointing us to his service, and, like, that is a thing that, if that doesn't humble you, I don't know what does. Yeah, I love that perspective too, because in Acts 9, I think it talks about how there's, like, this reaction out of the church, like, almost like this guy, and, like, it makes they didn't want to accept him.
It makes total sense why they would react that way. But then that also kind of magnifies Barnabas's ministry, because Barnabas the encourager is one of these first guys who kind of stands in Paul's corner. So it kind of makes sense on both sides. Like, you get the reaction of the church. Like, it makes total sense why they would be reacting this way. But then it makes you realize, man, Barnabas is kind of sticking his neck out for this guy.
Yeah, he's got guts.
He does. And so it makes you appreciate that all the more. And it's amazing just to see. Galatians is such a fascinating book. There's so many different facets to it. Paul talking about, and he's making his defense for his apostleship in that first chapter, where he's talking about, like, no, I didn't receive this from anyone. He's like, he's not undermining Peter, but he's also like, I didn't go to Peter, I didn't go to the apostles, I didn't go to John to get this and, like, become schooled in this. No, I received this from the risen Lord himself. And anyways, it alludes to your calling. Like, this is, God had a specific calling for Paul in mind, and I think that's what keeps him humble, because he knows who he was. And again, to kind of bring that full circle, that's why he says, I'm the least of the apostles. He knows he is one, because he saw the risen Lord and he received this gospel from him. But then he's like, I don't deserve this. I'm not worthy of this. And I think that is such a like it's like a propellant for Paul. It's like such a stimulus for Paul that undeservedness, that uncanny grace that he was given. Yeah, it was always propelling him in whatever he did for the Lord.
Yeah, his whole life was a response to grace. I mean, it's like what he said in Romans. You know, in light of the mercies of God, present your bodies as living sacrifice.
Exactly.
It's like you look at all God's done for you. How could you not respond? To that.
That's good.
And when you see Paul, like, I'm the chief of sinners, you know, and that's not his. That's not just like him being that's his real perspective. Like, I don't. You know, Christ Jesus came into this world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. I don't deserve this, and like all of it is just a big thank you. You know, that's what the Christian life is.
Yeah, a big thank you.
Yeah,
that's good. I want to transition to talking about your book, because you just are. That's been a big project for you. You've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah.
And I talk about kind of where it came from. It's called. Well, give us the title. Yeah. Give us the premise.
Sure.
Tell us kind of where it kind of emerged out of.
Yeah.
And also why you think Ecclesiastes is a book of the Bible that kind of changed your life, so to speak.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about this. So to kind of backtrack a little bit, and you'll get, if you get the book and you read it, you'll know. It's not like a biography by any means, but I mean, I involve a lot of personal life and stories and things in it. And one of the reasons that it's been so impactful for me is because I was always somebody on the more melancholy side of the spectrum. Naturally speaking, I'm a very glasses half empty at best. Like that's how I come to the world, just with my natural disposition. And so it's funny. I mentioned this in the book that when I was first saved, I was at a Bible college, small Bible college, and I think there was at least 2 or 3 different people. I think at least 2 for sure, that on separate occasions told me, they're like, you remind me of Eeyore. And it's like, you know, that's not a compliment.
Yeah. How do you take that?
Yeah. You know, it's like, but that's who I was, you know, that's like, you know, I was a new believer and I was still coming into the new life in Christ. And it's like, but naturally speaking, I was very much Eeyore. I still don't know which character from Pooh Bear I am at present. I've asked my wife, I'm like, you know, I don't really know if there's an ideal character, because like probably best case scenario, you're Owl, and Owl's kind of a dunce, you know, and it's like, and Rabbit's a jerk, and Tigger's careless, and then, you know, Piglet's anxious, and Pooh's he's kind of a dunce too. You know, it's like, so it's like, I don't know who you really want to be, but you don't want to be Eeyore, right? It's like, that's what everybody probably agrees. Like, that's the one label you don't want to have. And so kind of because that's my natural bent, I always felt a lot of, I don't know. I could always relate to Ecclesiastes, because I open it up and this guy's like, vanity of vanities. Basically, I love, there's one scholar, I don't remember who it was. He summarized the message of Ecclesiastes as life sucks and then you die. And I'm like, that was who I was, you know, life sucks and then you die. I'm like, amen. I get it. You know, that's where I'm at. And so you open this book and it's like, everything's vanity. What gain do you get from all this? And I'm like, this is a guy who gets it. And then, interestingly enough, my church family, we do a Bible reading plan every year. And we were reading through the Old Testament last year, I believe, or no, let me see. It would have been 2 years ago in 2024. And we hit the book of Ecclesiastes. And all of a sudden, I kind of got a different picture of Ecclesiastes for the first time. And it was funny because I'm somebody that underlines in my Bible, and I know that some people think that's super taboo, and it's like, I get it, but I'm that guy. You know, I don't highlight and everything, but I at least underline. I make little notes and things. And it was interesting. I underlined all of these significant vanity passages in my years of reading Ecclesiastes. But there's a number of times, you've preached on Ecclesiastes, you know this, he talks about joy.
Yep.
And there was like, I started like reading through it, and I'm like, you know, this was a whole passage on joy, and I never underlined that. Yeah. So I think that my kind of preconceived notion that, you know, that the teacher is the Eeyore of the Bible that I relate to, so dominated my interpretation that I actually missed the good news in Ecclesiastes. Yeah. Every time. And so we were reading through it, and then I was like, maybe I've misunderstood this book for my entire life. And so I started reading it more and more. I tried studying it more. And then I determined I was going to actually preach a series of Sunday sermons through Ecclesiastes. I'm like you, I go through books of the Bible. That's my goal. I never sat under expository preaching, so I don't know what it's like to be in the pew. But when I went to seminary at Lancaster Bible College, they were real big proponents of expository preaching. And the more I kind of saw the comparison between that and like just grabbing verses here and there, I was like, this is what I want to do in my ministry. It might not be as flashy. It might not be 3 steps to, you know, your blessed life or whatever, but I think it's much better for feeding the souls of your people.
Yes, amen.
And it forces you to preach passages you would never preach otherwise. Like you're preaching through a book of the Bible, and then you hit some passages, you're like, yikes.
The one that I came to a long time ago is the one that I never thought I'd get to, was the one where it talks about the prophet of God. I can't remember if it's Elisha or Elijah. I think it's Elisha, where he like sicks the bears and all those
it's
kids.
Elisha. Yeah. They make fun of him because he's bald. Yeah.
It's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
I remember having to preach through that, and that was
it's
that
fun.
was a challenge.
Yeah, it's like you hit those passages, you're like, oh man. But it's interesting,
Anyway.
like as a pastor, and here's where I think there's kind of a bit of a disconnect for a lot of people. As a pastor, if you're a good pastor, right, you would encourage your people to read the Bible during the week, right?
Yeah.
And here's the crazy thing is you have so many pastors that don't want to preach through books of the Bible because you hit tough passages, right? Well, you're telling your people go read through the Bible on their own. So basically you are sending them out into, like you have people that are used to, standing water, where they can stand and they can breathe. And you're sending them out into the deep end on their own.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's like, and nobody sees the inconsistency in that, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, I don't want to preach this because it's hard, but you go read the Bible on your own, and then they go read the book of Judges on their own, and they're like, hold up. That's in the Bible?
Yeah.
Like,
what do I do with this?
They raped this lady all night long.
Did that guy sacrifice his daughter?
Yeah, like literally, this is his plan. Is he's like, I'll send my daughters out. And this guy's like, well, no, I'll send out my concubine. And she raped for an entire night, and then afterwards they cut her up and mail her around. And you read that, and you're like,
what do I do with this?
Yeah. What do you do? And as a pastor, you tell your people, hey, it's good to go read the Bible. They hit that on their own. They're out in the deep water. If they don't have a context for that, it's going to trouble people. Like I remember when
1,000%.
when I was real young to faith, like I was reading through the Bible for the first time. I had no framework because I'd never sat under that kind of teaching. And I'm in the Old Testament, and I'm like, there's some wonky stuff in here. Like they didn't teach me this passage in Sunday school. Like what's going on, And it's like, and you don't know what to do with it. You don't know that there's a lot of scripture that's not the language that I think I was taught in seminary. I picked it up somewhere along the line. Is a lot of scripture is descriptive, not prescriptive.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's like, it's not saying do this, it's saying this happened.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's like, and a lot of times when it's saying this happened, what it's actually doing in the prescriptive category is saying don't do this.
Yeah.
You look at Judges, and the whole book is like, this is what happens when everyone does what is right in their own eyes. That's the teaching of Judges. And it's like, okay, so we need God, we need his law, because if everyone's just left to their own devices, which is the world we live in today, Judges is actually very timely.
Yeah,
because everyone's got their own truth and all the kind of postmodern conception. It's everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes. You get the book of Judges, it's like, this is the fruit of everyone doing what is right in their own eyes. But it's like, if you don't understand that and you're just out there in the deep on your own, you read those things and it's like, why is this in the Bible? Like this is troubling. And so, you go and as a pastor, then you preach through harder passages, because then you can help walk your people through the deep waters, because you've had time to study. You've had time to even engage with commentary. I mean, I don't have all the answers on my own. Sometimes I hit a passage and I'm like, this is yikes. Like, I don't know what to do with this. And I pray about it and I study it. And then, you interact with some commentaries. You're like, okay, this is really good. I would have never preached on it in a million years. But now that I'm stuck with it because it's the next passage that I'm going through, it's like, this is actually really edifying. Like, this is good, solid stuff. Or it's one of those things that's like, it's a little bit more intense, but you can help walk people through it and see why that's in the Bible, the purpose it has. And I would say all of us believe what Paul says in 2 Timothy, that all scripture is God-breathed and profitable.
Yes.
And the test of whether or not you actually believe that is if you're willing to preach your books.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Because it's like, I come to a text and I'm like, well, this is God-breathed. This is profitable. I don't know how it's profitable yet, but we're going to get there. It's like, and so you kind of go through this. And so all that to say, I went through Ecclesiastes with my church at the beginning. Actually, this time last year, I preached my first sermon on January 26th of 2025. So it's like literally this week. I was actually supposed to get the proof copies on the day that I preached my first sermon. I was like, that'd be kind of cool, like little thing. But we went through Ecclesiastes. And as I said, from that one read through I did back in 2024, then plus the sermon series and stuff, I was like, this is actually, I've totally missed it. I've totally missed it. I think there's so much more to Ecclesiastes than meets the eye. I think that if you only catch the vanity of vanities, you've only caught half the teacher's message, and you actually are worse off than where you began.
Yes.
And so going through it that way with my church family, I had a lot of good feedback on it. Yeah. One of the young guys in my church was like, I think Ecclesiastes might be my favorite book of the Bible now.
Yep.
And I was like, winner. That's like, that's awesome. And the more I dwelt on it, I was like, I really think how this is shaping my life, again, as a natural Eeyore sort of person, it's really helped me in how I look at life. And basically just coming down to accepting the things in life that suck and living with it anyways.
Yes.
With a sense of hope and a sense of meaning that is found in God. And that was very helpful to me, just forcing you to be like, yeah, some things are just crooked. That's life under the sun. That's the world that we live in, a fallen creation that is longing for the revealing of the sons of God. Like, it's messed up down here. Yep. There's nothing you can do about it. So you can choose to kind of wallow in complaining and all the things you would change if you could, but you can't. Or you can change your perspective and live a different life.
Yeah.
And basically confronting me with that hard truth, it's kind of one real concise way to put it. That's how Ecclesiastes began to change my life. And as the more I wrestled with it, I was like, I've had a dream to write a book for, I don't know how long, a long time, probably a decade. And I was like, I think I could turn this material into a book. And I know it's helped me, so I know it can help other people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
Ecclesiastes, just to echo a lot of what you said, is, I think, one of the most formative books. It's also, as you said, it's one of the most misunderstood. When I was preaching through it, there was a couple of commentaries that really slanted towards the negative view.
Yeah, and there's some that still do. They still do.
Yep, they see
there,
it only through this negative lens of whoever you think the preacher is, Solomon, whoever. I think it's Solomon, but whoever you think that person was is just kind of going through all of these very morose views of life here on earth. I think what's so helpful, and you kind of hinted at this, but I think to put it on the nose, so to speak, Ecclesiastes is one of those books where you have to read the ending before you read the beginning.
Yeah, sure.
Like, most people, if you pick up a novel and they read the ending, it's like, how dare you do that? How dare you read the ending first? But I think actually Ecclesiastes has the best framework if you realize the conclusion he's coming to, which is this whole thing is about fearing God and keeping his commandments, or to use it in the hymn parlance, this is all about trusting and obeying. That's how we, when we walk with the Lord and we do his good will, that, as the song says, it's trust and obey, fear God, keep his commandments. That's the lens by which you can understand everything else. Because all of the other things he tries, all of the other attempts he makes to find something that is not Hebel, that is not like this just wisp of a cloud on the wind. Everything else just falls short. Everything else is just an utter failure. And that's kind of the point. It's actually, I think, a very, as you said the word, it's hopeful. It doesn't seem hopeful at first because he's describing all of these things that are just devastating.
Yeah, and the problem is, like you were saying, is usually people only catch half of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I think one of the most helpful things for me is when you understand, whether, again, authorship aside, he refers to himself throughout as the teacher, the preacher, whatever. Like, that's who he is. It's probably Solomon. I mean, he's the only one that was king over Israel in Jerusalem. Like, that he's the only one that fits that category. But that aside, when you see that he's introducing himself in this way, even all the commentaries I had just called him Kohelet, which is the Hebrew word behind teacher, preacher, whatever. Because they're like, we don't even know, is he a teacher? Is he a preacher? Is he a philosopher? Like, he's an assembly addresser of some sort. And it's like when you realize that his goal, this isn't his diary. So for me, it was always like, I viewed it as a diary, as like, this, you're opening up this guy's diary, this guy's journal entry for the day, and it's like, well, I hate my life and it's not worth living. And you're like, that's kind of rough. But then when you see, no, he's not giving you his diary, he's a teacher, he's a philosopher, he's somebody addressing an assembly, right? He's got pupils that are hearing this. And it's like, okay, maybe this isn't his diary. Maybe there's a reason that he's trying to drag you down into despair. And there's one commentator talks about shocking them awake with the reality of God. It's like you need to catch the bankruptcy of life apart from God in order to see the hope. Like you need to be in that storm before you can see the beauty of the sun peeking through the clouds. And if you don't hit the bottom, you might think afterwards, like, well, there's still something else that I could reach for that might fulfill me outside of God. But when he takes you down and down, and you're like, I don't think we can go any lower. And then he's just like, whoosh, he brings you as far down as he possibly can. And you're finally like, okay, life apart from God, under the sun, in the terms that he uses, is absolutely empty. It's bankrupt of any meaning. And if as the atheist says, we are just, basically clumps of cells floating on a rock through space by mere happenstance. There is no meaning to life.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no ultimate part. Like literally there's nothing. It's like, well, I can impact somebody else's life. Well, guess what? You're going to die. They're going to die. You're going to be forgotten. None of it matters.
If there is nothing else but life under the sun, you could say to that atheist or whoever, yeah, you're exactly right. Like that's kind of the point, is drawing this very stark contrast and distinction between life just under the sun. Yeah. And you could also, like, I don't think he mentions it in Ecclesiastes, but it's kind of this subtle understood thing that's not in the text, but you could kind of infer it. But life above the sun. Yeah. And like life above the sun is exactly what he's trying to point people to as he's focusing on life under the sun, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's actually chapter 5 of my book is titled Life Beyond the Sun.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's exactly like, you spend time down under the sun, you see the bankruptcy of life under the sun, how it doesn't have any meaning or purpose aside from God. But it's like the good news is there is life beyond the sun. Yes. So that's kind of the trajectory of Ecclesiastes. You can catch that. That's what you need to see. Like if you just see the under the sun part, and then you're going to come away sad, and rightfully so. And if you're an atheist reading Ecclesiastes, you should come away sad. Yeah. Because you're like, wow, this does all absolutely mean nothing. Like if you don't see life beyond the sun, then there's nothing there's no reason to live down here, because at the end of the day, it's all going to be dead and forgotten anyways.
And those passages that he sprinkles, that the preacher sprinkles throughout in Ecclesiastes, where he talks about like eating and drinking and being merry because tomorrow we die. There's a sense in which there's some commentators, and I've read some, and I'll put some links to commentaries in the notes to the show, but they would interpret them very negatively again, like he's just sort of this nihilistic philosopher, waxing eloquent about how nothing matters. But actually, I think it was really helpful, again, this distinction, like changing your perspective, let alone changing your life. It helps remember like what he's doing is like, I always love those passages, because I think one of them comes after he talks about the idea that like there's always going to be corruption and leaders above you. There's always I think it's chapter 8 or chapter 11. But anyways, one of those chapters, he talks about that, and then he, encourages eating and drinking and being merry. But it's such a helpful perspective. Like there's things that are beyond our control. As citizens of whatever nation you are, there's things that are beyond your ability to impact or influence or have any involvement in. So the best way that you can bring glory to God is actually just having a dinner party, not fretting over the things you can't control, the things you can't influence, the things that are beyond your ken. But oftentimes that's where we are. We're so focused on all those things that are beyond us, and we forget, hey, maybe just invite your neighbors over for dinner, and that's how you can glorify God right in this moment. And that to me was always such an influential and impactful perspective to have on those passages, but also like what our calling is here. There's a passage in 1 Peter chapter 4 where he talks about he mentions the ideas of what the church is to do in light of the end times, because he talks about the end times coming in 1 Peter 4, and then but I think what is so fascinating to me is one of the distinct things that he mentions there is hospitality, and it always makes me connect that with Ecclesiastes. This idea that like there's things that are crumbling. Maybe you have power structures that are full of corrupt leaders and all that kind of stuff, and he talks about things that make you think like he's talking about our world right now, which is why Ecclesiastes is so timely. But then his answer is, just have a dinner party with your friends, and that's how you can show the kingdom of God to others.
Choose to simply enjoy what you can control. It's helpful to me, and what you're hitting on actually is, I think, so helpful, especially in the modern day and age, because so many people feel this pressure to like change the world, or that they need to know everything there is to know about everything. I was actually I help with the nursing home ministry down in Mount Carmel, and yesterday I was talking to this older lady in there and about the news and stuff, and she's like, they're all talking news, and I was like, I don't watch news, like at all. Like I 0% watch the news. And some people would say that's irresponsible. I'm like, well, what can I do about it?
Yeah, exactly.
I can get sad about it. I can get mad about it. And at the end of the day, we all know that it's probably not true. Everybody's like, there are no unbiased people out there, and everyone brings their biases. And it's like, I'm not in Minnesota. I don't know what's going on. Like, and even the people that are there don't know what's going on. And it's like, so I'm going to get my life all in a wreck because I'm watching about things that I have zero control of. I can't make any difference there. a central Pennsylvania pastor.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'm going to get upset about it, you know. And no
Yeah.
matter whose side you take, some people are going to be upset, and it's like there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can let all of the things you can't change ruin your life, or you could say, I'm going to control what I can control.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we have a lot less power down here than we realize.
Yeah.
And I think people, even sometimes as Christians, have this sense that like we're supposed to be world changers. Like, you know, the apostles turned the world upside down. It's like, well, that's true in a sense, but you know, you don't ever catch the passages. I think one's in 1 Thessalonians 4. One of them's in 1 Thessalonians for sure, where Paul talks about living a quiet life. And it's like your boring, everyday, seemingly mundane life lived for the glory of God and the good of others is actually a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And maybe God, you know, yes, I believe God calls people to go to the nations and, you know, and calls people into these highly, you know, from a human perspective, highly influential, impactful things. Sure, I believe God does that. But I don't believe everybody's called to that. And I believe there's glory in the ordinary.
Yes.
That so many people overlook. It's like you're not supposed to just be a world shape. Like if you go to work, you do a good work, you know, you work with your might, as Ecclesiastes says. You go home, you love your wife and kids. Like that's kingdom work.
Yep.
And it's like, you know, you're contributing to the eternal difference in the lives of your children. That's a huge deal. You serve at your local church and you help in a way that impacts it. That's a huge deal. And like, but I want to be a world shifter. It's like, but maybe we're not supposed to change the world. We're supposed to change our world here.
Yeah.
And it's like there's glory. Yeah, there's glory in those ordinary things. You can find the extraordinary in them. And I think that all of that kind of ties in with this idea of like you control what you can control. I can affect my family. I can affect my church, my friends. Like I have this circle of influence. It's not global. So I'm going to do what I can here. I'm going to control what I can control. And again, one of those is being my perspective, which I think is one of the things that you find in Ecclesiastes in those joy passages is it's like, yeah, there are crooked things and they're going to be crooked. You can't straighten them. God can straighten the crooked things and he will one day.
Yes.
And, you know, and we can hope in that, but in the present, some things are just going to suck.
Yeah.
What do you do about it? You just live anyways, and you just find things that you can find joy in, and you find people that you can impact and fellowship with and love on. And it's like you control your small section of the world as much as you can, your family, whatever. Like you work in that and let God handle the cosmic stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene, the scene from Lord of the Rings that I think is so impactful and helpful. You know, when Frodo is complaining about like, why did this happen in my time? Why did Bilbo find the ring? Why is the ring in my possession? Why did all this sucky stuff happen in my time?
Yeah.
And then Gandalf is like, that's not for us to decide. All that we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I think that little scene is such a powerful window into, I think, what the writer of Ecclesiastes is getting to. Like, it's not... That's why Ecclesiastes 3, I think, is one of the most impactful chapters for me, especially the beginning where he's talking about there's a time for this, and there's a time for that. Yeah. There's going to be cycles. There's going to be seasons.
Yep.
Like, if you're in a season of melancholy or you're in a season of stress, I think one of the most helpful things is, like, this too shall pass. It's not going to be like this forever.
Yep.
And deciding, as Gandalf says in his sage advice, deciding what to do in your time is the only thing that we are responsible for. We're not responsible for changing the times or managing the times, because again, that's beyond us.
Yep.
And I think that's such a fitting message, because when I preached through this, when was that? It was maybe 2019 into 2020, I think. Okay. So things hadn't blown up in some of the ways that it still is now.
But it was close. Yeah,
it was close.
It was
it was right on the verge.
Yeah, for the Lord of the Rings, it's the deep breath before the plunge, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But regardless of where you insert this message, it'll always have a resonance because we feel these things. And I think that's what's so helpful. I think one of the most helpful books on Ecclesiastes was Zach Eswine's book, which the name is escaping me right now, but he talks about this idea of living in east of Eden. And like, that's what Ecclesiastes describes. It's like, this is our world, and we can't change that fact. So how are we going to live within this world, especially in light? And I think another helpful thing, reading Ecclesiastes from the end to the beginning, as I said earlier, go to chapter 12, read the last couple verses, and then go to chapter 1. But also remembering, like, this is all a part of a revelation of who Jesus is. Like we can't divorce Ecclesiastes from Luke 24,
sure,
where Jesus is like, all of this is meant to point to me.
Yep.
And I think that that's another helpful thing to remember. We can't read Ecclesiastes in a vacuum. Like this is just a description of how horrible life is.
Yep.
But actually it's meant to remind us that in the midst of this morass of evil and corruption and injustice that he describes, that's the exact world that God in Christ came to dwell.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's where he comes to, which is why I think Ecclesiastes is resonant. But anyways, I find it so impactful.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's especially helpful to me to consider. One of the most fascinating things to me is the progress of revelation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so you find this guy that says, trying to remember I think it's in chapter 3, I think, where he says, who knows if the spirit of the man goes down to the earth, the spirit of the beast goes upwards, basically. Like, we don't know. Like, and to see that this guy is like, well, we're going to fear God, and we're going to, the summary phrase that I came up with for Ecclesiastes is fear God and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
That's the final chapter of the book, fear God and enjoy the ride. And it's like, if he's able to do that, I love that Jesus's line of argumentation where it's how much more, right? You hear that was a popular thing with a lot of the rabbis, how much more? If this is true, then how much more? And if you're able to look at Ecclesiastes, and this guy that knew of Sheol but didn't know of resurrection is able to say, listen, you should walk in the fear of God, keep his commandments, and seek to just enjoy the seemingly mundane things of life as God's gift to you.
Yeah.
If he's able to find joy in those things, and then we turn the page of the New Testament, and we know that at the end of the day, God is going to right every wrong. God is a just God. He's going to handle all of those things that we wish we could handle, but we can't. And that this creation that's longing out for the revealing of the sons of God, for this day where everything will be created anew, like we have that picture now as New Testament believers. And if he was able to take his eyes off of the earthly existence and find hope beyond the sun, how much more is the New Testament believer who knows the full story, who knows Jesus by name, knows the gift of salvation, knows that one day we'll be with him for all eternity, not in Sheol, but in a glorious new creation. How much more should we be able to enjoy the ride along the way, knowing that like that's what's to come?
Yeah. Yeah.
Today might be mundane, but like, today's not forever. Like this sense that is difficult is not forever. I'm currently preaching through the book of Malachi, and the great irony is in chapter 4, he talks about the Son of Righteousness arising with healing in his wings, right? This idea that night is not forever. The next verse, he talks about the calves you'll go forth like leaping, like calves from the stall. And I never understood what that meant, and I'm doing some study on it, and they say that the calves were let out in the springtime. So the calves leaping from the stall means winter's over, is what that means. And so that passage is kind of this beautiful reminder to these people in the midst of, again, kind of a similar thing with Ecclesiastes, struggling with the prosperity of the wicked and God's seeming injustice. And like, God, what are you doing? This world's messed up. Malachi says, listen, God's going to take care of the wicked in the world. And by the way, there's a future day coming when night will be no more, when winter will be no more. And the beauty of that is I was supposed to preach that last Sunday. We canceled service on Sunday because of the snow. I'm not sure if you guys did.
Yeah, we did too.
I figured probably most people did. And I was like, I am not preaching that message live stream. Like I'm gonna do something else. I'm waiting. I'm saving this one.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks ago, crazy snowstorm, 3/4 of our attendants, they couldn't come, probably just because you can't get out of your driveway. Last week we had to cancel. And then Lord willing, this Sunday, winter's not eternal.
Yeah.
Like what a beautiful, providential thing. But you look to the New Testament now, and we have that hope that like this vain life. And it's funny that I found, I don't remember who pointed it out, but when Paul talks about in Romans 8, the creation being subjected to futility, that word futility is actually in the Greek, it's the same word that the Septuagint uses to translate Havel from Ecclesiastes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that kind of like that's kind of a fun little the creation was subjected to Havel.
Yeah.
But that's not the end of the story.
Correct.
And like we have this hope that, night is not eternal, that winter is not eternal, that the suffering and hardship and all the wreckage of a fallen world, it's not eternal.
Yeah.
And that which is eternal, that's coming, is beautiful.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that has really impacted me, and I'm going to bring it back to Ecclesiastes, but I went through Habakkuk, and I preached through that, and I'm preaching through Exodus. Yeah. And I think this is just so awesome just because it's like, of course, it's the Bible. It's going to be resonant. Yeah. But also, it's just the way the Bible, I think, describes the human experience, I think, is so profound, obviously, because it's God's words. But what I always find, what I'm learning, at least in this current season, is what Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 5, where he talks about living by faith and not by sight. I think is number one, it's way harder than I think that we can ever imagine. Like we throw that phrase around so often. It's like, oh, we walk by faith and not by sight. But we don't actually realize the difficulty of that, the challenge that presents. If that's your operative framework, we're going to live by faith and not by sight. Well, guess what? There's going to be some things that put that to the test. And so, like, I think a really good example is what I'm getting ready to preach on out of Exodus, which is when they're about to cross the Red Sea. And I always find that so fascinating in Exodus because God led them to this point. And they're like, oh, shoot. We can't go this way.
We're toast.
Because there's water. There's terrain all around us that we can't go to the side. And now there's bloodthirsty Egyptians racing after us. If you just go by sight, it would be similar to what you find described in the book of Ecclesiastes. This sucks. Nothing matters. Moses, why did you bring us out here? Was there not enough graveyards available in Egypt?
Like,
why'd you bring us out here? And that's kind of the point. If we just go by what we see, it's going to sound like, and I think that's why Ecclesiastes to me is so relevant. It's kind of like a commentary on what Paul says. Like, we live by faith and not by sight. So it's a kind of a commentary on the latter part of that. Living by sight looks like this. Living
awful.
By sight looks like injustice, corruption, evil. There's unrighteousness all around. The people who are trying their hardest are going to fail, and the people who don't try, they're going to succeed. Everything seems unfair, and by its opposite, living by sight is like that. But living by faith is that, like your chapter, is living beyond the sun, living by realizing that there is not just someone, but there is a maker and a creator who is also your redeemer, who is involved and he cares and he knows all of those things that you are dealing with. I think that's what's so resonant. From Exodus to Ecclesiastes, all the way to Paul in the New Testament, to right now in 2026, we are struggling with living like that because we can be exactly like the Israelites, exactly like anyone throughout history. Living by sight is always going to lead to melancholy. Living by faith doesn't erase the melancholy, but it just allows you to have a hope that is not shaken, which I think that's the point of the Bible. And one of the points. That's one of the main points of the Bible.
Helping you kind of I talk about in the in-between.
Like
we live between promise and fulfillment.
That's right.
And it's in this time where it's kind of hard. I love what you said about Exodus too. It's like, this is God's fault. He's his cloud brought us to this place that's impossible. And it's like, are you going to trust him that he's not only going to bring you to the sea, but through it? That's really neat. I think
I think what's awesome is finding all these connections within Scripture that let us realize that humanity hasn't changed. Like, we're the same. Like, even though this was 4,000 odd years ago or whatever, we're pretty much exactly the same. Humanity hasn't changed that much.
Deal with the same. You read some of the stories, you're like, that sounds familiar. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun.
No, exactly.
Like it's that same idea.
Exactly.
It's that same idea of like, I'm gonna fill this God-sized hole with all these earthly pleasures. It's like, well, that doesn't work. And you still have the same sin nature that is throughout the Bible, and people that are, no matter how outwardly righteous they might have seemed, it's like, they can totally make a mess of their lives. It's like, it's the same story of people that are in need of redemption again and again and again and again, because like, that's this world we live in.
I remember reading a story, and this is just what makes, I think, Ecclesiastes so resonant and so relevant. And you find it all throughout, like, history and culture and all these things. There's that story that, and I found the original article just to make sure it was true, but like Jim Carrey, he gave this interview one time, and he talked about the fact that he wishes that everyone could have fame and success and popularity. Basically, he wishes that they could have everything that they ever dreamed of, so that they realize that that's not what actually fulfills them. That actually is not what like brings them satisfaction. And it's like, man, he's right there.
He's that guy that so many people want to be. Like,
exactly.
You're famous. Your name's out there. You're probably wealthy off the.
And he's struggling with the very things that the preacher is struggling with.
Yep.
And he just doesn't have that other beyond the sun message of hope.
Yeah, like I got everything that I wanted, and it still hasn't filled me. Like the classic God-sized hole. It's like, you keep trying to dump stuff in there, and it's like, I'm not in that place where I can say that I've tried everything and found out that it's, but like I'll take somebody else's word for it. At the end of, at the end of the day, I'm like, and that's one of the things with the example of the teacher. It's like you look at him recounting all he had, and it's like you have the opportunity to either take his word for it or try to prove him wrong. Like you could try to be like, your example with Jim Carrey, anybody famous, you can work your tail off and you can make all the money and you can have all the things and you can find out the hard way that it's empty, or you could take someone else's word for it who did get there and realizes like, no, this isn't what's supposed to fill you. You are made for something else.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the other things that makes Ecclesiastes so frustrating in some ways is that it has a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of unresolved tension.
Yep.
And I just think we're not geared towards being okay with that.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a statement somewhere in the book that we'll all die with unanswered questions.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's just like, that's part of life under the sun. It's like, there are crooked things that'll remain crooked. And like, there's nothing you can do about it. It's like you wish you could. You'd like to have the answers, but God doesn't owe us all the answers.
No.
And even sometimes people go to the Bible and they're like, they expect to have an answer for everything. It's like the Bible doesn't need to give us an answer for every single thing on every issue in life. It just needs to give us enough to know what we need to know.
Yeah.
It's like there are going to be questions that people ask me all the time, and it's always eschatology stuff. Like, what happens in this? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The Bible doesn't say, like, if that was important, I think God would have told, like, again, you got to be careful because it's not that it's not important, but like there are so many things that God could have told us and didn't. So I guess we didn't need to know that. And at the end of the day, like we were talking earlier about faith, it's like if God answered every one of our questions, where would faith come in?
Exactly. Yep. Then we wouldn't have...
You wouldn't need faith.
Yeah. Paul talks about that quite often. He talks about there would be no reason for faith if we had everything by sight. And so that's why he makes this case, not just in 2 Corinthians, but in several letters, that like that's why not everything is revealed to us.
Yeah, you just got to learn to walk by faith. It's funny, like I in the chapter on life beyond the sun, talking about a biblical worldview with God as creator versus an atheistic worldview. It's like, at the end of the day, we have to take God's word for it. Like if he said he made everything, it's like, I don't know how he made everything. I'm not the creator, but he said he did. And so I have the opportunity to walk in faith and trust him. Like, how do you speak things into existence? I don't know. But when you're God, I think that you're on an entirely different category level that, like, I don't need to know. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, he has like, that phrase. What chapter is it in Ecclesiastes? He's like, God is in heaven and we are on earth. Like, that's a very, like, it sounds so rudimentary, this distinction that he makes.
But that's
kind of the whole point. And he's like, God is God and we are not God.
Yeah.
And so
sit down and shut up.
Exactly.
Therefore let your words be few, I think is what he follows that up with. It's like, God's in heaven. It's like, it's like the book of Job. You get to that point where Job's like, God, I've got issue with you. And God's like, where were you, Job? Like, are you kidding me? Like, you look at all this stuff. There's a band I've listened to recently called Ghost Ship. It's actually the guy that did the music for Mars Hill.
Okay.
And I don't even know what genre you would call it. It's like folky, rocky, something. I don't know. It's wonderful though. And he's got a song called, I think it's Where Were You? It's basically that whole idea from Job. And the whole song is that. And it's just it's a helpful thing to me. Like, it doesn't answer the questions, but it does put it in perspective that it's like, I'm talking to my maker.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's like, where were you when I did this? And I did this. And and you look at that and you're like, okay, I guess I'm really small, he's God. I am not. And he doesn't owe me an explanation for everything. And maybe I'll just trust him. Maybe he's told me enough about himself, revealed enough of himself to me, not only in the Bible, not only in creation, but even in his providence in my own life, that it's like, I'll just choose to trust him and let the chips fall where they may.
Exactly. And I think that's such a helpful perspective. As Christians, as pastors. Yeah. And I think the things that we're talking about, I think is really fascinating too, because these are just kind of blunt truths. Yeah. And I think that's part of what Ecclesiastes is. It's kind of a blunt book.
Yep.
And if you're not okay with receiving some of that blunt truth, then you're probably not going to be okay reading Ecclesiastes.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I don't know. I've always found, for me, that's the kind of things that I like to listen to, like the shows or the radio or the TV, whatever. I like the hard truth stuff where people, they go and they just like hit people with hard truth, and it's like, oh man, that one stings, and it's like, but sometimes that's what you need. Some people have this idea of, I'm trying to think of how to word this. They talk about tough love, and it's like, but it's not loving to sugarcoat everything all the time.
Nope. Yeah.
Like sometimes the most loving thing you can do is give people the good, hard, honest truth that totally sucks. But it's like, that's what people need sometimes.
Yes.
And that's kind of what Ecclesiastes does, is it's very blunt. It doesn't answer every question. And, and it's nice because it actually, one of the things I love about that, and even some of the lamenting Psalms and different things, is that it gives words to some of the things that we might want to say but feel scared to say. You look at that and it's like, basically, God, where are you? Or what's going on? And again, we're going through Malachi, and the people say it's vain to serve God. And you're like, what awful, horrible people to say something like that. And then you look in your heart and you're like, and I've thought the same thing.
I've been right there.
I've been right there where it's like, I do all this for God, and what's God do in return for me? Do I get anything out of this? And then it's like, you see those things, and it's like it gives voice to what what you've said at one point or another, or what's been in your heart at one point or another. And in giving voice to those things, it actually gives you an answer that maybe you weren't looking for, where it's like, really? You're going to say it's vain to serve God? And then he goes and shows like, well, there is a day coming. Maybe the wicked are prospering today, and maybe life is good for them today. But look at the end. And then come back to me. Yeah. like if you are of God's people and you're serving God and you think that maybe it's not working out because God hasn't blessed your socks off today, come back to me tomorrow.
Yeah.
Look at the end of Revelation and say it's vain to serve God. It's like, but those passages, they confront you with those things. Again, even in Job, it's like, well, where were you? And, we come and bring our questions to God, and we probably wondered some of the things that Job wondered. We, thank God, haven't experienced life like him, but like, you go through those times of suffering, and it gives voice to some of those things, and you get to hear God's response in his word. And sometimes the response, like in Ecclesiastes, is like, well, it's crooked.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Nothing. There's nothing you can do. Yeah. And that's actually one of the reasons Ecclesiastes was so helpful for me, because I would always get hung up on so many of those tough things. It's like, I don't like this crooked thing. And it's like, okay, did we ask for your opinion on that? It's like, but I don't like it. And it's like, but that's how the world works. And it kind of sucks. But what are you going to do about it? Well, I can't do anything about it. Okay, so are you going to let that ruin your life?
Yeah.
Or are you going to say, you know what? Yeah, sometimes things are hard. Sometimes things stink. Sometimes I would do things differently, but I'm not God. And so again, like we said earlier, I'm going to control what I can control, because that's all I can control.
And then remember what God says to Paul, like, my grace is sufficient for you, even in your weakness. The weakness of our inability to control things is precisely where God's grace is found. And I think that's such a hopeful and helpful message that emerges out of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, it's really helpful when you look at things that way. There are things that you learn in the valley that you can't learn on the mountaintop.
Yep, exactly.
And there are perspectives that shape you, that it changes the way you live things. I'll tell you something that has been helpful in my life is, I've dealt with some different health things for a number of years. And one of the things I deal with is joint pain. And it comes out like crazy. And, there are so many things that we take for granted every day.
Yeah.
And one of the only ways to stop taking something for granted is to have it taken away from you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, I had something going on like 2 weeks ago where my shoulder was just killing me. Like, and I dealt with this for a while, and it's like, it was better. And then like, I can't pick up my kids without like a ton of pain,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the next day or 2 days, 3 days later, whatever, that inflammatory cycle passed. And it's like, I can pick up my little girl who's 2 years old without pain now.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's like, I do that every day, but it's like, it's just what you do.
Yep.
And it's like, but this is a kindness of God to me, to give me my little kids that I can do this with, and that was not taken away, but the fact that it hurt so bad, it made it like, you get the idea. It's like, but you experience that, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I am more blessed on a day-to-day basis than I ever realize. And sometimes just having those little bad things that come along the way remind you of how good your life truly is.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Shifting gears just slightly. So this book, From Vanity to Joy, emerges out of this sermon series on Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
Kind of talk about that process of taking sermons and converting them into a book and making it not just resonant to the people that you're preaching to, but resonant to more audiences and more readers. And
so again, we mentioned earlier, I'm not a topical preacher. I don't like topical stuff as much. But one of the things I found is there is a lot of, like, again, the joy passages. Basically, for the most part, it's like, your food, your drink, your work, like the seemingly boring things of your life, right? Those are a source of joy that you can genuinely find as a gift from God. And like, that's a theme. Fearing God and keeping his commandments is a theme. And like, so one of the things I did is, as I was going along, I would finish my day in the office. So the way I structure my week is I do the vast majority of my sermon prep on a Tuesday. It's a very long day, and I try to have a first draft of a sermon manuscript. I try to type out every word that I'm going to say. I mean, obviously, I don't preach from manuscript. I know people that do. I wish I could, because it would give me a lot more control.
Yeah.
But I'm somebody that once I get going, I kind of just, you go, and then you clean up afterwards. Like that's kind of how you do things. Yeah. But I found that what I would do is on my Tuesday, like when my quote unquote work day ended, I was like, okay, I think this is really good. And I'm going to kind of take this and copy and paste sort of thing, just to get some of the main ideas. And then I came at it different times, just when I got time, and I'd go through and I'd try to compile it. And I'm like, okay, here's all these different joy passages are kind of saying the same thing. And I don't want my book to mirror Ecclesiastes in that it's like, here we go, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. I do one big bad and then one big good, and so kind of following that trajectory. And I just kind of compiled it. I've never written a book before. I don't, not to be whatever. I think it's pretty good. Like I'm not really a proud person, by any stretch. Again, kind of the recovering Eeyore, that's who for the longest time in my life, that's who I'd see, like you look in the mirror and you're like, who is this clown? What do I bring to the table that's of any value? And, I think it's been very helpful just going through and then expanding on some of the illustrations, adding some stuff that the church didn't get to hear because in the providence of God, it happened in the last calendar year. And I think it's helpful. The one danger that I see in it is this is a book that you don't want to read partway. I'm sure we've all had books that we've read a chapter of and put down, or read, halfway through and put down. So I have 12 chapters. If you don't make it to chapter 5, that's bad, because like I kind of follow that same trajectory where I try really, really hard to bring people down, right? Just like the author of Ecclesiastes does. Like, I want you to feel the weight of how utterly meaningless life is apart from God. And then in chapter 5, it's like the lights turn on.
Yeah.
So if you don't make it that far, probably don't buy the book at all.
So this is the commercial. Make it to chapter 5.
Make it to chapter 5. If you make it to chapter 5, the good thing, I was talking to my wife, I said, I got 7 good chapters. I got chapter 5 through 12. It's all good. It's all hopeful. It's all encouraging. Like, there's probably some convicting stuff in there too. I mean, I definitely, there's different times I don't try to pull any punches sort of things. I hit people with truth. Again, tough love sometimes is what real love looks like. But I kind of tried to follow that similar narrative arc, even though this book isn't a story, so to speak.
Yeah.
I tried to follow a bit of an arc where it's like, okay, the introduction's all about Havel, like kind of this idea, introducing that life is a vapor and knowing that this is kind of this vaporous experience that we have is kind of an important backdrop for Ecclesiastes, for life itself, and for the book. And then go into life under the sun. That's the first chapter. And like trying to consolidate the bulk of the negative parts of Ecclesiastes as far as life under the sun goes. Again, consolidating a lot of these ideas from messages and even from other messages from a while ago, different things that I've studied out. It's amazing when you studied something even a year or two ago, how when it's relevant to what you're writing, you can just crank it out because it's still there in the back of your mind. So I went that way. And then you've read Ecclesiastes, obviously, anybody else that has, the teacher kind of gives you a bit of a diary after verse 12 in chapter 1, I believe. So he opens with his grand, like, vanity of vanities. Everything's vanity. There's what's gained from all your toil? What do you get out of this? Why do you go to work on Mondays? You know, like, and then he says, I, the teacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart. You know, he goes into this search. And he details in that section, it's like a chapter and a half or whatever, how he got all the things. He tried to figure the world out, found out you couldn't figure it out. He got all the things. He got all the ladies. He got all the wisdom. He worked really hard. And he looked back at everything he had, and he's like, this is empty. So that's the second chapter. So you kind of go through, like, vapor is kind of this backdrop, life under the sun, some of the hardships. And then it's like, well, you know, how does this guy make these claims? Like, who is this guy to say that everything's empty? And it's like, well, let me show you. This is a guy that, like you said, like Jim Carrey, he's been at the top. In his day, he'd have been a celebrity. He'd have been a millionaire, a quadrillionaire, a gazillionaire, whatever you know what I mean? Like, he's the kind of guy that people today would envy because he had it all. He's speaking from that position of, like, I acquired what everybody else will try to get, and it didn't fulfill me. So will you trust me? Will you trust that these things are actually empty and not have to learn the hard way on your own? And so I kind of go there. I do a little bit of recounting the fall after that, you know. So before we get to the good news, I try to give some clarity on the bad news. So there's, like, life under the sun, the badness. Here's his proof from his own experience, and here's why everything's bad. You know, according to the biblical worldview, God made things good. And a lot of people struggle with this idea of, you know, the question of theodicy. How could a good God who is all powerful and all loving make a world that's so screwed up? And, you know, people leverage that against the Christian all the time. And I think probably the everyday average Christian a lot of times doesn't know how to answer that because it seems like a gotcha. It's like checkmate. You know, if he's all powerful, then how come it's so messed up? How come he hasn't fixed it? And if he's good, then how come it's bad? But you look at what the Bible says, and God looked at everything he created in Genesis 1:31. He says it was very good.
Yes. Exactly.
God made a good world.
Yes.
We messed it up.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's the teaching of the Bible, is that it's actually human rebellion. It's sin. It's all of those things that are at the root of why our world's so messed up. And so that's a little bit, again, it's not an apologetics book by any means, but kind of dipping our toe in there. Like, before we get to the good news, it's helpful to understand why the world is crooked and why that we're stuck in this world that's seemingly beyond repair. And then I have a chapter on this whole idea of the crooked things remaining crooked. I'm trying to remember the name of it off. Unchanging Rules, I think, is what I titled it. It's a shorter chapter, but it's basically like, this is the world that we live in. It's crooked. Here's why it's crooked. And here has how in the present it's not going to change. And so then the next part of the book is like, the ball's in our court. We're stuck in this world that we wished was different, but it's not. So what do we do about that?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is you need hope. And the only way you can have hope is you need that God who's beyond the sun. So we transition to there, and then we transition into controlling what you can control, mainly your perspective. I have a couple different chapters laying out the different ways that's done. Again, kind of looking at Ecclesiastes in that sense a bit more topically, finding joy in contentment, finding joy in the present season, again, which you alluded to in chapter 3, and trusting that God has made everything beautiful in its time. And this trust in a sovereign God who has orchestrated my life's present season uniquely beautiful in some way. There's something that he's doing in my life, even in the seasons, that I would change if I could. And will I trust him in that? And so that's kind of the narrative arc of the book. Again, the bad, the reason for the bad, the introduction of the good, and then living kind of in this in-between time. And then I end with a note of hope. Chapter 11, I think, is the most helpful chapter in the book. It's a life beyond vanity. And that's where the gospel comes in and the hope of eternal life. And just, again, that how much more idea of, like, if this guy could find joy in his earthly existence, not knowing the name of Jesus, not knowing salvation by grace through faith at Calvary, like, he didn't have that whole picture, but we do.
Yeah.
How much more should we be able to see a reason for hope and joy and peace and meaning in life, knowing that I can have an eternal impact on the lives of others? Like, that's a huge deal. That's not vain.
Yeah.
You know, from an atheistic worldview, again, we're all just cosmic accident. We're the monkeys who hit the DNA lottery.
Yeah.
There's no reason to our lives. And you could say, well, I'm going to help somebody else. Okay, well, they're going to die anyways. Big deal. It's like, oh, I devote my life to, you know, philanthropy, whatever. I'm going to try to, it's like, but they're going to die. So in the scheme of the existence of this universe we live in, there is no meaning. But if there is a God who's beyond the sun, if he really is who he claims to be, if he's really acted in redemption, then when you and I serve in our local churches and love on our people and preach God's word week after week, we can have an impact for eternity.
Yeah.
Versus just, you see, like, and that's the beauty, like, that's where you should land, is the hope is like, okay, this world is crooked. There's things that I would change. It might seem meaningless, but like my time here can have an eternal impact that does actually matter. And so I can have hope.
Yes.
And so we end there, and then there's kind of just a closing chapter. Again, that idea of fearing God and enjoying the ride, tying it all together.
Yeah.
Before that, I do have an entire chapter on the fear of the Lord, because the one thing I don't want in a book on joy is for people to just go to like the hedonism of like, I'm just going to pursue pleasure as my greatest goal. It's like, well, the fear of the Lord is basically what keeps that, in check. It's like, I'm going to enjoy my life and what I can control in a way that according to God's word is pleasing to him. I'm going to fear God. I'm going to keep his command. Like, that is the necessary qualifier. If you don't have that, then it's all going to be just, again, back to that chapter 2, pursuit of hedonism, pursuing more and more and more and more and more. And it realizing those things, it's like, no, they have to be enjoyed in relationship to the God who is the giver. And so those things are kind of married together, and then kind of end it with a bow, that idea of fearing God and enjoying the ride. And so, yeah, I don't know. As I said, I think it's good. I find that when I read my stuff, I'm like, I think this is all right. But I got an app recently called 11 Reader. I don't know if you've ever heard of the AI apps that read to you. So like your standard reader app on your computer makes it sound super robotic.
Yeah.
You'd be like, this is from Vanity. You're listening to it and you're like, I'm not buying this book. This is garbage. But they have, in our day and age, they have apps that make it sound like an audiobook, and it's all electronically read. And the first time I listened through it, not in my voice, I was like, if I listen to this like it's somebody else's work, I'm like, I think this is actually pretty good. Like, to me, it's like, if nobody ever benefits from it, I benefit from it, because I need to, like, Ecclesiastes changed my life, but I am not fixed yet. Like, I'm still a work in progress. I still have bad days, like we all do, And it's helpful for me to go back to even my own material to tell me, like, hey, dude, you don't realize how good you've got it. Get your act together. You know what I mean? Like, so listening to it from somebody else's voice gives you like a bit more of a distant perspective that was actually super helpful.
Yeah. That's what was really helpful for me when I wrote my book a couple of years ago, was just... It may sound so conceited and selfish, but I assure you it's not. But I was writing that book really for me. Like, I knew what I was going through in those moments. And so, like my book, Finding God in the Darkness, how does God find us in the darkness? Yeah. And that kind of sentiment, that kind of message is the one that I needed to hear. So, like, again, like I've heard stories about people being impacted by that book, and which is awesome. That's the only reason why I wrote it. And I wrote it because I knew what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And anyway, I think that's really helpful, because even if you're writing this book because why I write is because I want to try and think deeply about these things. And I think writing a book allows you, like, the difference between like a sermon and like a Substack article and like a book. They can feel similar. One has a really specific audience, a sermon, a local audience, a Substack article. You have to get to your point
a bit more generalized, like one size fits all.
But a book allows you to have, like, one of the most helpful pieces of advice I got was from Chad Bird. He was helping me. He wrote the foreword to my book, and he was talking about the idea, like, when you're writing a book, how do you go from, like, taking an article and, like, making it a chapter in your book? Well, you can just take your time a lot more. Yeah. And I think that's what's really helpful. You can, okay, let me pause and let me really unpack what I'm trying to say. Yep. So from a sermon, you're like, let's get to the point. And a Substack article, let's get to the point. And here in a book, you're like, I can really take my time. Kind of unpacking this.
Yeah, you could set up shop on that.
And it allows you to think through these things a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it was helpful for me when I was going through. One of the things I found is I always said, and apparently I was wrong, I always said, if I ever write a book, I'm not going to have 20-page chapters, because I hate reading books that have 20-page chapters. Like, it just feels so long. I'm like, like 15 tops. Well, I will confess, I think 4 of my 12 chapters are 20 pages. I was telling my wife yesterday, I was like, I never actually looked at the final page counts, like in the printed form. Yeah. It's like, I'm a liar. I got like 3 that are 20 and 1 that's 22. And I'm like, oh boy. But I had one that I actually I actually nipped my chapter 3 and chapter 4 was initially just chapter 3. And finally, I felt for a couple reasons that I should split them. One was it was like almost a 30-page chapter. So that was, that was a big need.
Yeah.
And two is like, then it gave me more time to that chapter on unchanging rules of like chapter 3, this is why the world's crooked. This is the biblical worldview on where suffering comes in with the fall and all this. And chapter 4 is like, well, listen, you're stuck with that. And I got to sit in that. It's not a real long chapter. I think it's the shortest one in the book. But I got to sit with that a little bit more. And it's like, this is life. You can't change it. And just really let that part of the message just marinate, I guess, a little bit more for the people. Word. Like you need to grasp how inconsequential your actions are in the scheme of the universe God's made.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you can't fix the crooked things. You can't. You're stuck with it. And the example I use in the book is I was training for my first marathon last year. It actually, unfortunately, didn't go. So I say my first marathon. It's the first time I trained for a marathon. I still haven't run one. But I was in the middle of marathon training and I broke a toe. And that's a bummer. You know, like
yeah,
it's unfortunately you use your little toe when you run like a lot. You don't realize it until it's not there. Oh, it's still there, but you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm dealing with my kids, and the day that I broke my toe, I ran 14 miles that morning, and I felt great. It was the longest I'd ever run in my life. I'd done a couple half marathons, and I ran that day 14 miles. So that was the longest I'd ever done, just a training run out at the trail down the road, the Weiser State Forest Trail. And that night I broke my toe, and I could hardly hobble through the house. And like, what are you going to do about that? I can't unbreak it. Like I can't go back in time. And it actually, as much as I would rather not relive that, and it really, it was just a mess, but it really gave me good voice for this like crooked thing that you can't straighten. It's like, well, that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Like you can choose to be grumpy about this for the whole rest of this, what was supposed to be your training cycle. You can be mad at your kids because they were fighting and that's what got you to urgently run through the house and fail to thread the needle between the dining room table and the pantry wall. We're at this stage. My daughters are 6 and 2, and they're wonderful. They are God's great. I can't say greatest because God's been so kind to me, but they are one of God's greatest gifts to me. I love my kids to death. But my 6-year-old sometimes likes to harass the 2-year-old. And it's like, can you guys just get along, please? Like, come on. And so all of a sudden, the little one's screaming like bloody murder. And it's like, my older daughter's never like abusive or anything, but she's probably just taken a toy from her, whatever. But I go through the house to try to, administer justice, find out whatever's going on. And that's when it happened. And it's like, and then I could be mad at my kids for the next 6 months because, like, in one sense, it's my fault because I was the one that kicked the wall. But in another sense, it's like I wouldn't have been running through my house if they wouldn't have been fighting. But it's like, what's done is done. Mm-hmm. I can be mad at them. That's not going to fix this.
Yeah.
I can be upset about it. It's not going to fix this. I can choose to just like, this sucks and it is what it is, and try to make the most of it. And by the grace of God, I went and saw a doctor, and I was like, depending on who you ask, he was like, well, if it doesn't hurt too bad, it's not broken bad enough that you have to like stay off of it. And I was like, so you mean I can go for a run? He's like, if you can handle the pain. Yeah. So it's like, it ended up not being as bad as it, I mean, it still really sidetracked my plans, and it was incredibly painful. I'd never broken a bone in my body, and it's pretty subtle. It's not like I broke a femur, it's a pinky toe, but like, you look at that and it's like, it gave me voice again for this thing that I had kind of been writing about, or at least was going to be writing about. I don't remember the time frame. Again, this book's I started it on my birthday last year in February. So I'm really hoping, Lord willing, if the second proof copy goes good, to publish it the day before my birthday. So it'll be a 364-day project. Be kind of cool. We'll see how it works. Yeah. But yes, I don't remember the exact time frame, but like you said, it gives you a chance to kind of unpack those ideas. And having a whole chapter on like, this is just the way life is. Yeah. Forcing you to sit with it. It was helpful for me.
That's good. So by the time this podcast is out there, this book will be available. Where can folks find it? And where can they find more of you and your writing? And so where can people connect with you?
Lord willing, this will be going live on Amazon on February 10th is the hope. If not, again, by the time this airs, probably will be live. It'll be on Amazon. It's a self-published book on KDP. So as far as I know right now, that's the only place you can get it, unless, me personally, I should have some authored copies sometime in there. And you can follow my writing on Substack at withoutexceptionchristianity.com. Without Exception is kind of my online ministry space, this idea of like day by day faith, living every day without exception for the kingdom of God. And so that's where you can find more about me.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. All the links for that will be in the notes, and make sure to pick up your copy of From Vanity to Joy, or pre-order it whenever that's available, or by the time this is out there, it's probably going to be available. So anyways, find that link, go there, buy it. And if you're on Substack, subscribe to Josiah. Man, thank you for being here. Thanks for talking.
It's been a lot of fun.
And I can't wait till, not to put pressure on you, can't wait till your next book.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah, appreciate it, man.